We're about to dive into a text that's over 1,300 years old, but its origin story is one of the most incredible you'll ever hear. Seriously. It's a masterpiece of philosophy that, according to legend, appeared quite literally out of thin air.
So it all kicks off with a question that, let's be honest, sounds a bit like a setup for a punchline. But this question actually leads us to an 8th century Buddhist monk who would go on to inspire millions. We're talking even the Dalai Lama himself. His name was Santideva, and nobody, and I mean nobody, thought he was anything special.
Okay, so picture this. Our story is set at Nalanda, which was one of the greatest universities in the ancient world. Think of it as like the Harvard or Oxford of its day, a massive, sprawling campus just buzzing with brilliant scholars and devout practitioners, all of them dedicated to the deepest spiritual questions. And somewhere in that mix was Santideva.
Now, while all his peers were hard at work, studying, debating, meditating, Santideva, well, he just seemed different. The historical accounts, which are definitely wrapped in a lot of legend, paint a picture of a guy who seemed totally unremarkable. He wasn't practicing, he wasn't studying. To everyone else, he just looked lazy.
It gets worse. His fellow monks didn't just think he was lazy, they openly made fun of him. They even gave him a nickname that basically meant his only 3 talents were eating, sleeping, and, well, you know. They really saw him as a total disgrace to the monastery. Just this guy with zero wisdom or discipline.
So, they decided to cook up a little plan. They were going to call his bluff and expose him as a fraud in front of everyone. They challenged Santideva to give a teaching to the whole monastery, thinking he'd have to recite a scripture from memory. They even built the teaching throne extra high just to make it harder for him to climb up and add to the humiliation. They were absolutely sure he knew nothing and was about to fail spectacularly.
But then Santideva just accepts the challenge. He walks up, effortlessly takes his seat on that super high throne, and asks the monks, "So, should I recite something you've heard before or something new?" The monks, totally amused, were like, "Oh, definitely something new." And then he began to speak. But he wasn't reciting some old scripture. He was composing, right there on the spot, a completely original, mind-blowingly beautiful, and philosophically brilliant text.
And this is where the story just goes into full-on miracle mode. As Santideva delivered the verses of this incredible new teaching, the legend says he started to float, right up off his throne. He rose higher and higher into the air, still reciting this masterpiece, until he completely disappeared from view. The monks were just left there, jaws on the floor, with only his voice echoing down from the empty sky, finishing the teaching.
Wow, what a story, right? But as fascinating as a levitating, disappearing monk is, our focus here isn't really on the myth. It's about what he left behind. So let's try to separate the legend from the man and look at the real miracle, the one we can actually hold in our hands today.
This is it. This is the real miracle. The text that Santideva was supposedly reciting as he vanished is called the Bodhicaryavatara, and that translates to a guide to the Bodhisattva's way of life. This book is the work that has echoed through the centuries, and it gives us an incredible window into the mind of its mysterious author.
So who was the real Santideva? Well, historically, we actually know very little. We know he was an Indian monk and scholar at that great university, Nalanda, sometime in the 8th century. And he was clearly a genius, a brilliant scholar and a beautiful poet. But beyond that, the man himself is pretty much shrouded by the incredible legends that grew up around him.
And here's the crucial point. You don't have to believe in the levitation to recognize that Santideva was extraordinary. The proof is right there in the Bodhicaryavatara itself. It's a testament to an author of immense intellectual depth, brutal honesty, and a truly radical sense of compassion. The real magic, you see, is in the words themselves.
Now, to really get why this text was such a bombshell, you have to understand the spiritual world it was born into. Back then, there were kind of 2 competing ideas about what the ultimate goal of a spiritual life should even be.
So on one hand, you had the traditional goal, which was to become an arhat, a worthy one. An arhat is someone who follows this path of intense self-discipline and insight, all aimed at one thing: personal liberation. The goal is to escape the cycle of suffering and rebirth for yourself. It's an incredibly noble goal, and it's ridiculously difficult to achieve.
And this comparison right here, this gets to the absolute heart of the shift. The arhat's motivation, when you boil it down, is, I want to end my suffering. But the ideal that Santideva was championing, the Bodhisattva, has a completely different motivation. I want to end the suffering of everyone. That's not just a small tweak. That is a radical, game-changing reorientation of the entire spiritual path.
And this brings us right into the core of the Bodhicaryavatara. This entire text is basically an instruction manual, a guide on how to cultivate the mind and the heart of a bodhisattva. And it all starts with making a vow.
So what is a bodhisattva? It's someone who, out of this immense, overwhelming compassion, takes a vow to achieve full enlightenment, but not for themselves. No, they do it for the sake of freeing every single living being in the universe from suffering. They literally postpone their own final peace to stay behind and help others, no matter how long it takes.
This is one of the most powerful verses in the whole text, and it just perfectly captures this vow. See, the Bodhisattva doesn't just, wish people well from a distance. They pledge to become the very thing that others need. They promise to be the medicine, the doctor, and the nurse, whatever it takes to end suffering, for as long as it takes.
And then there's this. This is probably the most famous, most breathtaking expression of that vow. This is the line that so inspires His Holiness the Dalai Lama. It defines compassion on a truly cosmic scale. The commitment isn't for a day or a year or even a lifetime. It's for as long as existence itself continues. It is an almost unimaginable promise of selfless service.
So you see, Santideva didn't just disappear into thin air. He left behind a practical, poetic, and profoundly deep manual on how to live a life of boundless compassion. And it's a guide that is just as powerful and just as needed today as it was 1,300 years ago.
The legacy of this text is just immense. It's considered a true masterpiece of world literature and philosophy. For anyone who wants to understand the path of the Bodhisattva, this is the foundational text. And as we've seen, it continues to be a primary source of inspiration for figures like the Dalai Lama. It is, simply put, one of history's most powerful guides to developing a truly compassionate heart.
And that's where we'll end. The story of the so-called lazy monk leaves us with this one profound question, a question that completely flips our normal way of thinking on its head. It asks us to imagine a kind of freedom that isn't just about us, but is dedicated to all. It's the radical, world-changing idea at the very heart of Shantideva's miracle.